When shooting landscape photography, oftentimes we shoot with a small aperture to get large depth of field so that we can get foreground all the way to the background in focus. But oftentimes we also hear people say you shouldn't shoot with an aperture that is too small, because when the aperture is too small, then you probably will start to see diffraction, and the diffraction makes your images appear soft. For my Fuji crop sensor, I usually don't shoot with an aperture smaller than f8, and for my Nikon full-frame system, usually I don't shoot with an aperture smaller than f11. But is it really true? f8, f11 should be your go-to aperture and you shouldn't shoot anything smaller than those? I'm curious about that. So today I'm here at a local park and I'm going to test out which aperture start to see diffraction. So I'm going to test with my Fuji X-H1 and a 10 to 24mm f4 ultra wide-angle zoom lens, and then I will switch gear and test my Nikon Z6 with 14 to 30mm f4 ultra wide-angle zoom lens. The reason I choose ultra wide-angle lens is because with the same f number, a wide-angle lens is easier to see diffraction to kick in because the actual opening of the lens is actually smaller with a wide-angle lens compared to a telephoto lens. All right, I'm gonna start with X-H1 and a 10 to 24. I'm going to put the camera in aperture priority mode and then changing the aperture from f4 to f22 and to see how the images come out. I will take one set of photos at focal length 10mm, and then I will take another set of photos at focal length 24mm. I'm going to manual focus on the fence behind me, and once the focusing is in place, I'm going to lock it and not change it anymore. Camera setting, I'm going to shoot at the lowest native ISO without IBIS, without image stabilization, and I'm going to use 2-second timer and electronic shutter. All right, I just finished the 2 sets of photos, and now let's switch gear and I'm going to test with my Nikon Z6. I'm going to film with Fuji X-H1. For the Nikon test, I'm still going to shoot 2 sets of photos. The first set is at focal length 14mm and the other set is at focal length 30mm. I'm going to shoot with ISO 100 without IBIS, without image stabilization, and I'm going to use electronic first curtain shutter and a 3 seconds timer. All right, I just finished up the Nikon test, and now I'm going to head home and check out the results on my monitor. Before we start looking at the photos, I just want to quickly mention that if you are interested in Lumina 4, which comes with AI sky replacement feature, you can use the coupon code MING during checkout to save $10. If you are interested in Capture 120, please consider using the link in the description below. There's no extra cost to you, but you can help support my channel. Alright, this video is going to be a little bit longer than usual. I'm going to put timestamps right here. So if you don't want to watch the whole thing, feel free to skip to any timestamp that you might be interested in. Also, in order to see the difference, we need to look at the photos at 100% scale and then sometimes even at 300% scale. So we are going to do a lot of pixel peeping in this video. If you think the image quality is bad, the image is very soft, please keep that in mind. Let's take a look at the first set of photos taken with Fuji X-H1 and a 10 to 24mm lens at focal length 10mm. And I have photos from f4 all the way to f22. So first, let's compare f4 and f5.6. And on the left is f4, on the right-hand side is f5.6. I think the results are pretty similar if I go to even beyond 100% scale. Let's do 300% scale. And I still think the results are similar. Now let's compare 5.6 to f8. So on the left is 5.6, on the right is f8. And I'm going to go back to 100% scale. Overall, I think the results are still very similar. And if I look at 300%, then I think f5.6 is slightly, just a tiny little bit sharper than f8 on the right hand side. But again, I'm looking at 300% scale, extremely pixel peeping. I think when looking at it at 100% scale, both images looks just alright. Now let's move on and compare f8 to f11. f8 on the left, f11 on the right. And when looking at it at 100% scale, I think I can tell f8 is a little bit sharper. And if I zoom into 300% scale, and this time you can definitely see f8 is sharper than f11. Now let's move on to compare f11 to f14. And f11 on the left, f14 on the right. Currently, I'm at 300% scale, and you can see f11 is better than f14. If I zoom it back to 100% scale, you can still tell f11 is better than f14. Now, 14 to 16. Let's zoom into 300%, and you can still tell f14 is better than f16. Now f16 and f18, and f18 is even worse. f18 compared to f20. And f20 compared to f22. All right. So now I'm going to select f8, and let's do f14. So now I have f8 on the left, f14 on the right. Currently at 300% scale, you can see f8 is much better than f14 when viewed at 300% scale. If I zoom it back to 100% scale, you can still see f8 is sharper. Now let's take a look at the second set of photos taken with Fuji X-H1 and a 10 to 24mm at 24mm. And I also have photos from f4 all the way to f22. So first, let's compare f4 and f5.6. f4 on the left and f5.6 on the right. And I'm going to zoom into 100% scale first, and both images are very sharp. And now go to 300% scale, and I think both photos are equally sharp. Now let's move on to f5.6 and f8. 5.6 on the left and f8 on the right. And in this case, I think both photos are still equally sharp when viewing at 300% scale. If I zoom it back to 100% scale, both photos are very sharp as well. Now let's compare f8 to f11. f8 on the left, f11 on the right. And in this case, when looking at it at 100% scale, I think f8 is slightly sharper than f11. And if I go to 300% scale, then I think it's easy to see f8 on the left is sharper than f11 on the right. Now let's compare f11 to f14. I think when viewing at 300% scale, f11 is slightly better than f14. Now let's take a look at f14 compared to f16. And still f14 is slightly better than f16. Now f16 compared to f18. I think they are both similar, but then f16 still seems slightly better than f18. Let's go to 400% scale. In this case, I think they are similar, but f16 is a little bit sharper. And then f18 compared to f20. And the last f20 compared to f22. All right, now let's compare f8 to f14. And I'm going to go back to 100% scale first. On the left is f8 and on the right is f14. So I think f8 is just a little bit sharper than f14. I mean f14 is totally acceptable when viewing at 100% scale. If I zoom into 300%, you can see f8 is sharper than f14. Now let's compare f8 and f16. At 300% scale, f8 is sharper than f16. Let's zoom it back to 100% scale, and you can tell f8 is sharper than f16. For Fuji crop system, when shooting wide angle, I do think you get the best results when shooting at f8 or bigger apertures. If you shoot with an aperture that is smaller than f8, the images become soft very fast. It makes sense because when you are shooting at f10, you are shooting with an aperture that's equivalent to f15 on a full frame system, which is already considered a very small aperture. And if you are shooting with f14 on your Fuji crop system, then it is equivalent to f21 on a full frame system. I think all the full frame lenses can go up only to f22, so you get the idea how small that aperture is. If you find f8 is not good enough to cover the entire depth of field, then you should consider using a technique called focus stacking. I have a video on the topic of focus stacking. You can check that out using the link at the top or using the link in the description below. Now let's take a look at the first set of photos taken with Nikon Z6 and a 14 to 30mm wide-angle lens at focal length 14mm. I also captured a sequence of photos from f4 all the way to f22. So first, let's compare f4 and f5.6. f4 on the left, f5.6 on the right. And let's zoom into 100% scale. And I think they are both very, very sharp. And if I zoom into 300% scale, I don't think I can tell the difference between these two. I think they are equally sharp. They are both very good. Now let's take a look at 5.6 on the left and f8 on the right. And again, at 300% scale, I still think they are very, very close. They are both very sharp. And if we zoom back to 100% scale, I don't think I can tell the difference. Now let's move on to f8 and f11. Again, both images are very sharp at 100% scale, and let's zoom into 300%. They are still very, very similar. I think f8 might be a little bit better than f11 just by a hair. Just tiny little bit. Now let's compare f11 to f14. At 300% scale, I think this time I start noticing the difference between these two. I can say f11 is sharper than f14. Although viewing at 100% scale, the difference is still very, very small. Now let's compare f14 to f16. At 100% scale, this time I can tell f16 is a little bit softer than f14. If we go to 300% scale, and I think f14 is sharper. Now let's compare f14 to f18. At 300% scale, you can see f14 is sharper. Now f18 and f20. And 18 is sharper than f20. And the last, f20 and f22. And they are very similar again. And both images are a little bit soft compared to the previous images that we have seen earlier. Now let's compare let's compare f8 to f14 in this case. And at 100% scale, I think I can tell f8 is a little bit sharper. And if I zoom into 300% scale, f8 is on the left and f14 is on the right. And I think I can tell f8 is sharper than f14. If we compare f8 to f16, the difference is even bigger. f8 is definitely, you can definitely tell f8 is sharper than f16. What about f11 compared to f16? Yeah, f11 is still sharper. But again, at 100% scale, it is not that obvious. Now let's take a look at the second set of photos taken with 14 to 30mm wide-angle lens at 30mm focal length, also from f4 to f22. So first, let's compare f4 and f5.6. Again, f4 on the left, f5.6 on the right. Let's zoom into 100% scale. At 100% scale, I think they are both very, very sharp. I can't tell any difference. Zooming to 300% scale, still similar. I would say they are equally sharp. 5.6 compared to f8, again, equally sharp, I would say. And then let's do f8 and f11. I think in this case, I would say they are still equally sharp. I can't tell one is sharper than the other. Now let's compare f11 to f14. So in this case, when looking at it at 300% scale, I think f11 is a little bit sharper than f14, not by much, just a little bit. And then this is f14 compared to f16. Again, f14 is a tiny little bit better than f16, not by much. And then f16 compared to f18. Again, f16 is a little bit better than f18. And now compare f18 to f20. And last, let's compare f20 to f22. And let's go back and compare f8 to f14. At 300% scale, I think f8 is sharper than f14. Now let's zoom in back to 100% scale. They are both very sharp. But I think f8 looks a little bit better, just a tiny little bit. Let's compare f8 to f16. So 2 stops difference. So f8 looks sharper. If we zoom into 300% scale, f8 on the left is sharper than f16 on the right. Now let's take a look at f11 and f16. So at 300% scale, I think you can see f11 is a little bit better, but the difference is very small. For the Nikon full-frame system, I think the tolerance for diffraction is higher. You can get the best results up to f11, and I don't see much image quality degradation even when shooting at f14. At f16, you start to notice diffraction kicks in, and you start to see the image becomes soft. So if you want to get a super large depth of field, I think it's safe to use f14 with a Nikon full-frame system. Alright, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this video, please click on the thumbs up button below. And if you are the first time on my channel, please consider subscribing. And don't forget, if you are interested in Lumina 4, you can use the coupon code MING during checkout to save $10. If you are interested in Capture 120, please check out more information using the link in the description below. Alright guys, enjoy photography. Bye for now.